Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mallory, an American military wife living in Germany. It is a little bit of a different video today. It's gonna be more of a story type video. As you can tell from the title, it is about the tragedy of 9/11. I'm actually filming this the day after 9/11 on 9/12. Today, as I was getting ready to film, I started thinking, you know what, it actually is appropriate to still be talking about 9/11 after the day, because 17 years ago today, on September 12th, our country was still being rocked by this tragedy. We were still trying to understand what happened. People were still hurting, people were still missing. So I think it is very appropriate to talk about 9/11 on the day after 9/11, on 9/12. Just a quick plug, like I always do, if you like these videos, make sure to give them a thumbs up and hit subscribe, the red subscribe button below, if you want to see more of these videos. Normally I do videos on what it's like to be an American military spouse living in Germany, and this does tie into that topic ultimately. So I wanted to give my story of what 9/11 was like for me. I was 14 years old on 9/11, 2001. It definitely was the most traumatic thing that I have ever witnessed in my entire life. It definitely was hard to really fathom what was going on. Hard to wrap your brain around it, and it still is. And every 9/11, when 9/11 comes around every single year, those same emotions are present. And I think that's important. I think it's important to relive, to look back at what happened every year, because if we don't, we will forget. And I think it's extremely important, especially while those of us living who remember 9/11, while we are still alive, because ultimately there will be one day where nobody is alive who actually experienced 9/11. Just like pretty soon there's going to be no more people alive who fought in World War II. It's really important for us while we're here to share the story, because a statistic I heard on the news, actually our Vice President Pence, in a speech yesterday, he said that 1/4 of the US population was not alive on 9/11, 2001. And so those people obviously have no memory of 9/11. And there's even more people who were alive but too young to remember. My sister is one of them. She was only 4. And so she has no memory of 9/11. It's really important that we share these stories to remember what happened, to honor the people that died that day. Okay, so my story, my day began just like an ordinary day, like everybody else on 9/11, 2001. Like I said, I was 14 years old, so I was a freshman in high school. I was homeschooled, so I wasn't getting ready to go to school like so many other kids were that morning, but I was getting ready for school, to do school at home. While I was getting ready, I noticed that the TV was on and I heard that my dad was home. And I thought, well, that's strange, because that never happened unless somebody had gotten sick in the night, like one of my siblings. I have 3 younger siblings. The TV would only be on in the morning, and Daddy would only still be home from work at that time if somebody had gotten sick in the middle of the night. And at that point, I had this phobia of vomiting. I hated being around people that were vomiting, and in my mind, that was like the worst thing that could have happened. Back up to earlier that morning. So every morning my dad would listen, and actually still listens, to the sports radio. And on the sports station on the radio, they mentioned like, oh, hey, we hear that a plane has hit the World Trade Center in New York. And he's like, well, that's really strange. So he turned the TV on, and at that point they just thought that it was a small plane that accidentally hit one of the towers. And so he turned the TV on, and he ended up seeing the second plane hit the towers live. So he's there, and so he's watching this footage, and I guess eventually, the Pentagon stuff happened. I do have the timeline written up here so that I can refer to it. So I'm getting ready. I was in the bathroom brushing my hair. I remember the exact hairbrush that I was using. It was this purple hairbrush. And then my brother Zachary came down the hallway and he's like, "Hey, Mallory, you've got to come see what's on TV." And I'm like, oh, what? Like, I don't care. Like, I don't want to go down there or whatever. But I just felt like I needed to listen to him and go see what was on the TV. So I go down the hallway and my mom is out there sitting on the couch watching TV. My dad is there standing up. Zachary sits down in this little rocking chair and I stand there by my dad and I'm looking at the screen and the Twin Towers are smoking and the Pentagon, they have it, you know, like split screen. And I'm like, what's going on? What happened? And Daddy said, the World Trade Center and the Pentagon have been hit by planes. And I was like, okay, so planes hit them. Was this an accident? And he said, no, they're saying that it was a coordinated terrorist attack. And that just was like unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You know, they were just like everybody else in America. We were just dumbstruck by what we were seeing before our eyes live. This, you know, it's not like it was a replay. This was live TV. And, you know, the Twin Towers, we could see people jumping, and just the smoke and everything. And then just all of a sudden, the first tower starts to fall. And it's just unbelievable. And I started to cry because I realized what was happening. Like, everybody's dying. Like, we're watching this huge building come down. And Zachary, he's 3 years younger than me, so he was about 11 at the time. And so I think he wasn't, I mean, he knew what was going on, but he wasn't totally able to grasp what was happening. And so he was like, "Why is Mallory crying?" And Daddy was like, "Everybody in there is dying." And so we just prayed for the people in the situation, and then we saw the second tower fall. And I don't remember really much about the United 93 flight that crashed in Pennsylvania. Maybe they didn't know too much at that point. Just the rest of the day was this haze. I had a doctor's appointment to go to, and we always played the classical music station in the car, turned that on, and even they were talking about it. It was just impossible to get away from reality. I don't think we really completed any schoolwork that day because we just were watching what was happening. You know, you couldn't help it. You just had to watch because it was so horrible. And I don't know if it was that day, you know, on 9/11 or in the days and weeks that followed. But I know that when I heard President Bush saying about how we needed to go, that we were going to go after the terrorists, the people that perpetrated this horrible act, these horrible acts, you know, that will do anything necessary to get them, to get the enemy. It just really hit me that, wow, I'm 14 years old. I'm going to be growing up during wartime. And that was something that I had only read about in school, in history books, and historical fiction. And it really hit me that I am going to be growing up during a war. Like, America is going to war against these horrible people, against this enemy that did this to us, that wants to destroy America and our way of life and our freedoms and what we hold dear to us. And at that time is when I think, you know, I always had a respect for our country. You know, I was always glad to be an American, but I never really thought about it. It was just something inherent. And 9/11 made me think about what it meant to be an American. And that is when my patriotism really started to blossom. So fast forward almost a decade, and that's when I met my future husband, Mark, who was serving in the Army. He had just He was in his first year of active duty. He was a second lieutenant, and we met and then got engaged. And 10 years, it was the 10-year anniversary of 9/11. So it was 2011. And that weekend, my mom and I went to this beautiful 9/11 memorial ceremony in my hometown in Texas. And that very weekend, Mark told me that it was a pretty much like 80-90% chance for sure that he was going to deploy to Afghanistan for the first time. First deployment, period. But he was going to Afghanistan. It really drove 9/11 home in an even more personal way, because I thought, wow, here we are 10 years later, 10 years after this horrible event. And, you know, a month later, you know, in October, we send special forces into Afghanistan to start this war, or to continue it, because we didn't start it. The terrorists started it. They perpetrated it. And so we go after them. And here we are 10 years later, and my future husband is getting ready to go to that same land where the terrorists originated from, where they trained. And he's going to that same place and going to fight the same war. That year, that 10-year anniversary, I mean, it was a significant year, and then just very significant personally, because I thought, now I am going to really understand even more fully the price of 9/11, because I don't know what's going to happen to him. I don't know what the outcome will be for his life. And that deployment did end up being a very traumatic one for him personally. And then he's very fortunate to have come home. And he's been to Afghanistan twice. He went, actually it was just a little over a year. He came home in 2012 and then went back in 2013 for another deployment. Being a military family makes me think about 9/11 in a different light, in a more personal light. It's mind-boggling that it's been 17 years since that happened. This is not a video, you know, pro or against the war. I do not want to start a conversation about that, please. This is about 9/11, about patriotism, about the cost of 9/11. Of the people who died that day, the people who died trying to rescue people in the towers, and the people who have died on the battlefield because of 9/11, you know, over these past 17 years. I am very thankful for the freedom that we have. That is something that the terrorists can never take from us, is our spirit. And you could see, you know, post 9/11, the American spirit really flourishing. And sometimes I think we lose that in our current day. I hope that we don't have to experience another 9/11 in order to have that spirit again. I think we need to focus more on being unified and being strong and being proud Americans together. That is my 9/11 story. Sometimes I think, well, why am I talking about this again? I've talked about it every single year for the past, you know, almost 20 years now. But don't ever feel that way. Don't ever feel like your story doesn't matter, because everybody's story, we all have a story about 9/11. Whether we were directly impacted, whether we knew somebody that died or was hurt. I don't know anybody personally who died or was like directly affected. It still is important to remember. We don't ever want to forget that part of our history. So that is how I remember 9/11 when living even overseas. It was very unusual to go about my day and to just feel like it was another normal day here in Germany, because it is. You know, it's not Patriot Day here like it is in the US, but I still remembered. I had the TV on in the afternoon, kind of watching some footage of the ceremonies, the memorials going on back home, and yeah, my thoughts were just with the US and everybody directly affected by 9/11, and everybody indirectly, which is all Americans. So even though we have, you know, a whole nother year to go now before the next 9/11 memorial, let's not wait until then to show that unity and show our strength as Americans and our patriotism and the goodness that is part of the American dream. Thank you for watching. Again, make sure to hit subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. I know that we all have differing views, but I am a proud American and will never, ever apologize for that. I welcome y'all's comments as long as they stay respectful. If you have a story of 9/11, memories that you want to share, please share them, especially if you didn't get a chance to talk or share them yesterday on 9/11. I think it's really important that you do so and never feel like it's a broken record, because we have to remember. We cannot ever, ever forget. All right, well, I will see you in the comments, and I will see you next week for another video.